doesn't care about whether there's aid going to foreign countries. He cares about getting rid of the EPA. It is a bait and switch. It's destruction of our system of government.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
We have on the line now Sam Seder, host of the Majority Report. Sam, welcome back to the program. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, Jacob. It's great to be here. Forgive me, my voice is a little bit raspy. I've been fighting a cold.
No worries at all, and appreciate you fighting through it, being willing to come on the show even with a cold. I do appreciate it. Hopefully you're going to be on the mend very soon.
Yeah, let's hope so. Sorry, I need to get some tissue.
So, for those who don't know, I think most of our audience is going to be aware of you, but Sam Seder hosts the Majority Report. It's a progressive political talk show on YouTube and as a podcast. It started on the radio, although as far as I know, you are no longer on the radio anymore, but people can find you all over the internet. More than, is it millions of subscribers or 1 point something million? Lots of subscribers on YouTube. So I listen very, very regularly. And you've been talking, obviously, about stuff that's been going on in the Trump administration and his attacks on the state. And you've been referencing, this clip from Steve Bannon back during the first administration, where he talked about how the goal is to kind of dismantle the administrative state. And, a lot of that kind of talk does have support among a lot of people. And Asmongold on YouTube, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he is a politics streamer on Twitch, puts clips out on YouTube, and I'm gonna show you like the first 10 seconds from a recent YouTube video that got over 1 million views. This one, where he kind of expresses like a pop level sentiment about what's going on with these DOGE and quote unquote efficiency efforts. Let's play this clip from Asmongold.
There's a lot of retards that work at the federal government that do basically nothing. And so DOGE is made to get rid of those retards, right? To delete them.
And so, I think that's more crudely probably than most people would put it. But that's kind of like a popular sort of, or I mean, I don't know exactly actually how popular it is, but there are a significant number of people that actually believe stuff like that believe that lots of federal workers are just sucking on the government teat and there's so much waste and a lot of it is going to greedy, lazy federal workers, and there's so much waste in the federal government. Why do you think that kind of talk has appeal?
Can I swear on this, or we're on the radio?
We're on the radio, yeah. So keep it
All right,
PG.
well, because I got some choice words for that guy. But no, look, I think the idea of we're living in an era where after 50 years now of a broad neoliberal consensus in our government that the markets can do better and government is largely in the way. I mean, this started with Reagan, and government workers have been scapegoated for at least actively for at least half that time as somehow being problematic. And I can appreciate why people want efficiency in government. People want efficiency in everything. I mean, I don't know if you've dealt with your cable company lately, but the idea that you want people to be working and providing service for you, I think, is a universal one. But the idea that guy has any clue as to what government workers does is a joke. And the idea, just even broadly speaking, that what DOGE, which is the name of his meme coin, incidentally. I mean, he's just using this to market himself.
Right.
The idea that DOGE is in any way about efficiency is absolutely a joke. They're not doing an audit. They're going in there and they're destroying stuff. And, this is like This is like the equivalent of saying, you know, I don't like the furniture this guy is making in his shop, and going in and destroying the tools. That's what they're doing. They're destroying the apparatus of our government to provide for people. People should understand that, largely speaking, almost universally, government agencies exist for one reason. Now, there's some that have alternate reasons as well, but broadly speaking, government agencies exist to curb corporate power. They are there to basically make sure that corporations are not externalizing their costs on the rest of us. It is cheaper for a corporation to dump their chemical byproducts into a river, but they save money, they increase their profits, but we pay as a society in increased cancer rates, in birth defects, in our fish dying, et cetera, et cetera. And so what Elon Musk is doing is no different from what Republicans generally do. This has been their plan. Their plan was written up by a guy named Russell Vogt, who the Democrats, you know, stage a futile filibuster against the other day, but good for them for fighting against him. Whose plan is to go and demoralize federal workers to get them to quit, so that you don't have people working at the EPA, the FDA, the National Labor Relations Board, Department of Labor. You don't have people working at the SEC, for that matter, or countless of other agencies who are professionals and who have been working at this and who are actually in these jobs to do their jobs. And they want to replace them with lackeys, essentially. And so, I mean, I understand the desire to be paying into a system that is providing benefits to you. And there are certainly, in some instances, where we have agencies that are not doing that in the way that we want them to. But that's an issue for lawmakers. It is not for a billionaire to come in there, pretend like he's going to take out this agency or that agency, and understand a lot of it is for cover. He doesn't care about USAID. He cares about the Consumer Protection, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. He doesn't care about, you know, whether there's aid going to foreign countries. He cares about getting rid of, like, the EPA. It is a bait and switch, and it's also just it's destruction of our system of government. And you know, someday, my hope is we're going to get people who are running this government who are going to be more oriented towards providing benefits and support for working people and average Americans. And they're not going to be able to do that if there's no apparatus left after this.
Right. Exactly. And, you know, it's so... It is so, you know, I can understand exactly like you said. You want to see, you know, efficiency, especially when your money is going to something. But I think particularly with reference to federal workers, I think my running hypothesis is that people who feel very, very strongly about that have never worked or interacted with a significant amount of people in both sectors. Right? I mean, if you want to talk about, of course, there are people that are lazy within the government. Have you ever worked for a private company? Have you ever, have you ever been in a management meeting, in a big corporate meeting, you know, with private actors? I mean, the idea that the federal government is like the workforce or even management at the agency level is uniquely inept within the government is just so silly. It kind of belies a real lack of understanding about the world and a lack of, like, worldliness, a lack of interaction with people, you know, and I will say that Asmongold I found this out when I was trying to research for this segment a little bit. Like he apparently he talked about how I used to work for the federal government, so I know there's a bunch of people that are terrible. He worked for 2 tax seasons at the IRS, presumably as some sort of temporary hire, some sort of thing, right? And so now
of course he doesn't know what he's talking about. But,
exactly.
But I mean, if you just want to look at it as a data matter, every dollar that goes to the IRS in terms of funding returns like $6 to $7 in revenue. So, if you want to measure it on a data level, it's a 6 to every dollar you spend gets you 6 more for the U.S. government. I mean, it's quite obvious that they're doing their job there.
Exactly.
And frankly, if for every dollar you spent on the IRS, it was getting 10 or 20 back, these guys would be screaming even more because they don't want to pay their taxes. I mean, this is everything we're seeing is just Republicanism, right-wing conservatism repackaged into a slightly sexier veneer. And yes, anybody who's worked in corporate America knows that job number 1 is to cover your butt. And there are definitely there are good people who work in every industry and in every capacity for the most part. But the US government is far more efficient than corporate America. Broadly speaking, I mean, there's, again, I think we could look at the defense budget and see that, lobbying gets a lot of money.
The one agency, by the way, that is completely exempt from the hiring freeze.
Of course, it's on its face, it's total BS. But there is a relentless stream of misinformation and propaganda about this, from Joe Rogan on one end, up through CNN about this, because they are all in different ways making money off of creating this myth. Look, people don't make a lot of money off of providing social services.
Right.
They just don't.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
I mean, you don't have
really
investors.
Quick story about that is, I think that you're familiar with Matt Brunig. He is, he talks about politics. He writes about politics. He's a former NLRB attorney that was fired from the agency because of a tweet, which is kind of funny, about Neera Tanden or something. But he said that immediately, the week that he was fired from the NLRB, a management side law firm came offering him more than double what he was making at the NLRB to come and work for them. And so, especially in the agencies that they are targeting, like the EPA, the CFPB, the NLRB, the DOL, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, all of these agencies, every single one of those civil servants could go and work for management and make 2 to 3 times more immediately. Right? And so you're exactly right that, by and large, the people who are working in these agencies, there's some level of commitment and give a crap about the idea of, I want to protect workers' rights. I want to protect the safety of American workers. If they didn't care about it, they would go work for management and they would make more
100%.
money for it.
And understand, they've been working, a lot of these folks have been working, I mean, at this point, as far back as probably the Clinton administration, but they probably have worked, but you have a lot of people who've worked under George W. Bush, who worked under Barack Obama, who worked under Trump the first time, work under Biden. They're career professionals. They have done all of their experience and their schooling in a specific arena. Maybe it's labor law, maybe it's environmental studies, and they have both knowledge of their field and institutional knowledge as to how things work. You take those people out, and these agencies become ineffective, and then it's basically off to the races for these corporate interests. And so you'll see I can guarantee you the amount of times that Elon Musk spoke or talked about in depth, or frankly, any Republicans. In fact, to the extent that you can find any Republicans who were talking about USAID, they were largely supportive.
Right.
Both in its charitable work and, frankly, there's a lot of work that is sort of like projects American soft power. So the sort of like State Department end of American imperialism. Some people have more or less of a problem with that, but the dollars that we're talking about are not significant in the context of the U.S. budget, and certainly the stuff that helps develop other countries is not. I mean, I was watching Joe Rogan the other day. He's talking about, look how ridiculous this is. We're spending money on Afghan schools. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when we invaded Afghanistan, and the idea was we weren't going to leave it a complete mess because that's what breeds international terrorism. And now the idea that we're trying to build schools is problematic. It's all smokescreen.
Well, and the USAID thing, it's interesting because we just had on Jeff Shirky, a labor historian, to talk about labor's connections to USAID and some of the nefarious things that the AFL-CIO has done in coordination with USAID and the CIA and the State Department abroad, including, like in Chile and the dirty wars in Latin and Central South America in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And yet I oppose what's going on with Elon Musk and USAID. And so for some people that don't think too much about that, you might get a little bit of whiplash from that. But for one, it is worth saying that USAID does do some good work that should be defended on its
without
merits.
a doubt.
But even setting that aside, if we want to actually talk about what is the U.S. government doing nefariously overseas, let's actually have a transparent process of evaluating and auditing this kind of stuff. Let's create a church committee within the Congress, like how we uncovered some of the other stuff that the CIA was doing before. And let's do something like that and actually have an open process instead of the executive branch illegally going in and impounding obligations that the Congress has allocated and doing it in this kind of semi-transparent sort of a smokescreen process where you can see some of the stuff on Twitter, but there's no hearings or there's no opportunity for the people and the programs to defend themselves. You don't hear the other side. You just see what's on Elon Musk's Twitter account. This is all, for one, it's illegal. It's a violation of separation of powers, obviously, but it is also not a serious attempt to figure out what we are doing overseas. And Marco Rubio himself said we are going to see a significant increase in the use of private contractors, which, by the way, contractor pay makes up 12% of the federal budget. Total compensation for federal employees make up only 4%. But none of this talk is about, are we going to cut contract employees? Are we going to bring contract employees in-house so we can save money and we can be more efficient instead of having these contractors where the CEOs are making millions of dollars and the employees are underpaid, or even the employees themselves are making more than federal workers? There's no talk about that. It's all aimed at federal workers who, again, total compensation is 4% of the federal budget. And so church committee, let's do something like that instead of allowing a billionaire to go in.
You don't even need a church committee. You could do this through Foreign Service Committee. I mean, there's plenty of that's the thing. It's total BS. I mean, I don't know how else to say this. I mean, the idea that Marco Rubio is, concerned that the U.S. government is trying to influence elections in some other country through, supporting an independent press or something. I mean, it's all bull. like you say, he's going to bring in contractors. It's going to be more opaque, and they're going to do more nefarious things. I mean, and if the Congress believes that there's a problem with the way that money is being spent at USAID and some of these programs, they bring the head of the agency in, and they investigate it, and that's it. I mean, this is and most of these programs, incidentally, have been completely transparent. And they'll talk for weeks now. It seems like on the U.S. government supporting Politico. These are trade magazines that they're talking about, and there's subscriptions that different agencies get because they're reporting on government. I mean, I'd be more than happy to have government agency that provides this type of information across all of the agencies and provides it for free for the public. I mean, there's only two ways you're going to get it. One is if the government does it and provides it as a service for the government itself and for the public, or if you're going to you're basically outsourcing contractors, in this case, Politico Pro or whatever, Government Exec Pro, or there's a bunch of these trade magazines. And I'm aware of this. I've been looking into it because I knew the story was going to be in the agencies with this administration. And it's expensive to get reporters on this because there's just not a wide audience. Generally. And so much of what we're hearing is absolute BS, and people are buying it because Elon Musk is, has been lionized, and so much in so many people in the tech press have basically been reporting on this guy as a way of, it's like entertainment reporters. Half of them want to work in the entertainment industry, and they know one of the routes into that is reporting on these people and doing so in a very uncritical way. It just so happens that in the tech world, it's a lot more dangerous for the rest of us.
Exactly. Exactly. And also, another thing that's problematic about what's going on here is the idea that it's not only just unaccountable billionaires violating the law and the separation of powers and all of this and illegally impounding, congressional allocations and things like this. It's also racist 19-year-olds, right? Which people are pretending to believe that the argument is we have to ruin some kid's life for inappropriate tweets or whatever, and that's a very mild phrasing, saying normalize Indian hate, saying I was racist before it was cool, things like this, are a little bit more than inappropriate tweets. But we can both hold in our heads this guy shouldn't have his whole entire life ruined and be destitute and homeless for the rest of his life, while also saying he should not have a top position at the head of the largest employer on the globe. And it's not even hard to say that. Like, there are so many other jobs other than at the head of the United States government that it's so silly that people like J.D. Vance are pretending there's no way that they believe that is what people are saying, right?
No, I mean, look, there's a couple of things going on here. One is, I think they all should be fired. They shouldn't have any access to what they're doing right now. What they're doing is patently illegal. And, but secondly, this isn't a situation where a 40-year-old, we found tweets of his or hers from 15 or 20 years ago when they were a kid. The guy tweeted this stuff last month.
Right.
Right.
And so it's like, I mean,
has he grown?
The idea that we're punishing him for past, youthful indiscretions. Well, the theory behind that is somebody grew up and understood, like, hey, this type of bigotry is wrong, and I don't do it anymore. There's no indication the guy has any, like, what, I was on a bender a month ago? I mean, honestly, like, what are we talking about here? And so as far as I'm concerned, I don't give a rat's ass about this guy, one way or another. None of these people are doing anything that's even remotely legal right now. The question is that, who has standing to bring this to the courts, and will the Trump administration listen to the courts? Beyond that, listen, there is part of what the Trump campaign was about was changing our culture in such a way where bigotry is more tolerated. That's basically one of their agendas. They want to be able to use the R word, like that clip from that a-hole you played up front. They want to be able to say things like, normalize Indian hate, or, your body, my choice. That's what their agenda was. And they won. Yeah. And people can decide, for themselves if that's the kind of society they want to live in. But right. I'm not going to feel any sympathy for this kid. The kid has no right to be doing whatever he's doing. And he's not a kid. If he's a kid, why are we letting him into the control, essentially the control system for $6 trillion worth of U.S. government payments? And if he's not a kid, then he should just take responsibility for himself like an adult. I mean, you can't have it both ways here. And so I think the guy should be fired because what he's doing is illegal. I personally would never hire someone like that, because if I have other workers, I don't want to subject those other workers to this type of bigotry in the workplace.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the question of standing. You mentioned the question of standing earlier, and I talked about in Last Week in Southern Labor how there was a lawsuit by some unions to keep these people from having access to the Department of Labor's data, and the judge agreed that the defendants, the unions, had presented some valid concerns, and he shares those concerns, but unfortunately they did not establish standing. And it's just so kind of bizarre to me, the idea, like, well, who the heck has standing to protect workers' privacy data as workers, right? I mean, the Department of Labor, this is their data as workers. Who has the standing to protect workers' data as workers, if not organizations of working people formed explicitly for the protection and mutual aid and support of work? I mean, it's just the most bizarre.
Right, and it's catch-22 because you don't know if you're an individual worker whose information has been compromised, and you won't know that until too late. We are, if not we are at the cusp of a genuine constitutional crisis here, because we don't have mechanisms for this type of lawlessness by an administration functioning within our own government. We just don't have the institutional experience and the systems to deal with this. And so it's going to be, we're going to have trouble going through the courts. Trump got 270 lifetime appointees when he was there. So many of those judges are there because of their willingness to show fealty to Donald Trump. They have come up through the Federalist system, which is a right-wing, the Federalist Society, which is a right-wing sort of like incubator for right-wing judges. And they believe that the U.S. government should not function to protect workers, should not function to protect citizens, should not function to protect consumers, should not function but to smooth the way for corporations to basically do what they want. I mean, that is, more or less their doctrine. They believe in something they call freedom of contract. They don't believe in the existence of unions. They don't believe in the right for people to unionize. And they are now implementing their agendas, and they're getting the opportunity to do it. And so, like I think you mentioned it in the last hour, so much of what Trump and Musk and Russell Vogt, people should remember that name because he's going to be the head of the Office of Budget and Management. And he's the one who wrote the chapter in Project 2025 about demoralizing the federal workforce. Literally said, I want to traumatize these people. I want them to be afraid to come into work every day. Because he doesn't want these people to show up and do their jobs. And their jobs is to inhibit corporate power to the extent that, like, you know, the lobbyists in Congress will allow them to do it, or the courts for that matter. And this is, you know, we are in a very precarious moment because it is unclear. You know, so many of the things that the Trump administration is doing is to get to the courts and allow some of these right-wing judges and, frankly, justices on the Supreme Court to say, yeah, the National Labor Relations Board, that should not exist. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, that should not exist. The SEC should not have the ability to regulate cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what they're doing. They are trying. This is a 2 or 3 step process, and
Right.
If it doesn't get to the courts, how do you stop them?
Right.
You know, he's put in an attorney general who was looking into Trump University, I don't know, 10 years ago, and he paid her $25,000 for a campaign, and then investigation over. She's been working as basically a foreign lobbyist. His U.S. attorney in D.C., he may not even be licensed there. He was representing a defendant, January 26th defendant, who had been violent towards the cops. He becomes the D.C. Attorney, U.S. attorney, and basically drops the charges. I mean, this is a rigged game that we're watching, and you know, the important thing is right now, I don't want to sound too bleak, but I'm feeling pretty bleak about it. The important thing that people should be doing right now is organizing in one fashion or another. Labor is a great place to do that. Your union, or not even if it's not an official union, because, you know, the system that we have to essentially unionize legally under the federal government is under incredible assault, literally as we speak.
Right.
And so people are going to just have to organize largely outside of a legal framework. It's not to be, I'm not saying criminal gangs, but I'm saying you're not going to get the legal protections that you would have 4 months ago.
Right.
Your employer is doing an unfair labor practice. There's nowhere to go now. They've destroyed the board.
Yeah, it's pretty bleak. And you said not like criminal gangs, but I mean that's how unions were originally classified in this country. Was literally criminal gangs. And so we'll see. Hopefully they're not successful in their attempt to completely dismantle the American regime of labor relations, but. We'll be talking to folks about the labor relations before the NLRB, I'm sure, over the coming weeks and months.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.